Jerry, thanks for joining me today. Going to talk about your testimony a little bit. So if you would, as we kind of get into some things, tell me a little bit about your conversion to Christ, if you will. What was the experience like?
Well, I was adopted, and I share that because knowing that, growing up, I pretty much struggled with identity. I just, and didn't realize it at the time, but looking back, I struggled with who I was and questioned, my identity, my biological parents. But because of that, I think, it led me to do some things that I look back and I'm not proud of. But I got involved in drugs and alcohol at an early age, common story. But it led me down a path of just feeling hopeless. I mean, I did not feel confident in who I was. And I look back, I really feel it had to do with identity and just an emptiness. God blessed me, looking back, with the family I had, as much as I've shared in the past with people that it was a dysfunctional home life. But He watched over me through that time, and I can see His hand on me many times throughout my teens and into my early and mid-20s. And I grew up with a knowledge of God, going to church at a young age, but not ever understanding about having a relationship with the Lord. So a lot of it was just my parents sending me to church, and so I had that knowledge, but no relationship.
Sure.
Came fortunately out of the drug and alcohol lifestyle. Got married, but the baggage carried over into the marriage, right? And it was rocky, short-lived, about 6 years, and saw my marriage fall apart. In that meantime, though, God had led me to a church where I made a profession of faith, but there wasn't a strong discipleship type program there, and I fell away. When the marriage went south, I kind of gave up on the church for a while. Well, prior to that, I had given up on the church. But I turned back to God. I had heard the gospel preached and understood it. I made a profession of faith, actually during the marriage, but I never really had that mentoring, that discipling. And I put other things first still. I put a lot before God. If it was a conversion at that time during the marriage, it was more me looking to have God make things easier.
Okay.
When my marriage ended, I turned to God in full sincerity of heart. I knew that I couldn't continue to do the things that I had been doing, living the way I was. I didn't lose the kids, but I had 3 boys, and that relationship was strained for years afterwards. But again, God has brought that back today. But during that time, I saw Him do things that could only be God. And what confirmed it for me was 2009. I had been going to church, remarried, serving the Lord, and one night about 1:30 in the morning, there had been several deaths of young people that previous week or two, and I couldn't get that out of my head, because when I was 16, I totaled a Mustang that my dad had bought for me, and everybody that saw that wreck and knew what had happened that night, it's a long story, but to make a long story short, myself and another friend had walked away from that, and we probably shouldn't have. 2 days later, I was up on the hill with my friends drinking and carrying on, just as I had before, and we kind of had the attitude that we cheated death, right? And fast forward to 2009, this is 34 years later, saved and living a good life, blessed by the Lord. But I wanted to do more, and I had been praying about serving God. And in 2009, September of 2009, I woke up that morning about 1 a.m, and I was thinking of these young people that had died in car crashes and overdoses, and I had lost friends by that time as well. And I started to remember that night in 1975, and I was questioning why me. It was like survivor's guilt. And I started to just weep. I was crying. And it was like, why? Why did I live? What purpose was there for me to live? And why my friends? Why these young people dying? Some of them not even due to drugs or alcohol, just accidents. And I sensed the Holy Spirit speaking to me that evening, that it was not an audible voice, but
Sure.
Paul writes in Romans that the Holy Spirit testifies with our spirit. And I really sensed that I was being told that the devil had a plan for me that evening in 75 to take my life. And it was as real as us sitting here talking right now, other than the audible voices. And I really started to just weep. He said, but the Father had his hand on you. He has a plan for your life. And going back to my prayers that I would be able to serve in some capacity, and what really had a heart for guys in recovery, guys coming out of addiction. And it was about 2 months later that a friend of ours, Jeff Lingenfeld, walked into the lighthouse one morning. We knew one another in passing, and heard the door open. I looked back and said, "How you doing?" He said, "Good." I said, "What's new?" And he said, "Nothing." He said, working and doing the Promise Keeper thing, which he was doing a Bible study at the Salvation Army Rehab Center. And I said, and I was familiar with Promise Keepers, but I didn't know what he was doing. And he explained it, and he said, "If you're ever free on a Friday night, stop over." And went over that the next Friday evening. And from that point on, we served together for like 2 years. And Jeff stepped aside to focus on some other things. And I continued for about 7 years after that. So a total of about 9 years on Friday nights at the Salvation Army. And it went deeper than that. There was a lot of ministry that took place outside of that Friday evening as well.
Sure.
And it took me a while to realize, but God heard those prayers that year in 2009, and it kind of culminated with him leading me to, when being told that he had a plan for me, and leading me to that relationship with Jeff. We became very good friends through that, and was just blessed by God's presence, the reality of his presence in my life.
So one thing that's interesting with your story, sometimes people have a single event encounter that radically changes their life. Yours is a little more progressive.
It is.
Which I think is good, because we don't always see that. But the maturity, not only did you walk away from that lifestyle in some of those issues, but then you've gone to a mature place of you're actually discipling people who are struggling in areas that you once did.
Yeah.
And I think that's remarkable.
And God continues to do things to, like I'm no longer strongly associated, with men in recovery, but open to anyone if they come to the Lighthouse or people that I meet, whether it be in church or elsewhere, that are struggling with addiction. I'm open to relationships like that and mentoring, discipling. He's starting to give me a heart for kids too, and I just see our younger generation coming up and being so hopeless. And so in the process right now of praying through that, and I've taken some time to just wait on the Lord and see what he has, and what direction he wants me to move in. But the progression that you talk about had a lot to do with my stubbornness too, and my pride. So I have to put that out there and acknowledge that, it's us oftentimes that prevents the change and so on, whether it happens quickly or not. But God's patient, and I've seen that through that. He's patient, and that has been a conviction for me at times when I've been impatient with my own kids, with my wife, and friends even. So.
Well, thank you.
Been blessed.
This is. I'm thrilled to hear this story. I've known you for quite a while, and haven't known the progression of your story. And this is good. I hope other people listen to this can be blessed and inspired too. And maybe somebody who's in a transitional, progressive walk with the Lord may be encouraged by this, seeing that where you are now as a man of God and a leader in our community as a man of faith, where you had come from in that journey. So thank you for taking the time to share this with us today.
Thanks for having me, Troy. Enjoy it.
Sure.